From the farmer to the florist, from the baker to the bookkeeper, and everyone in between. Welcome to Your Country Business.
Welcome to Your Country Business, the show that is all about business in the bush, where we share the stories of the hard-working business owners and community leaders that make up the communities of rural and remote Australia. I'm your host, Shane Sellers, fellow country business owner. I'm passionate about business in the bush and growing the wonderful communities that make up rural and remote Australia. This episode is proudly brought to you by our show sponsors. Our show sponsors are Roma Fire and First Aid. They provide quality sales, service, first aid training and training of firefighting equipment in southwest Queensland. Our other show sponsor is ClearLogic Solutions, who provide professional business solutions in work health and safety, HR, recruitment, business planning and mentoring, and in business promotion through videography and also training solutions. Welcome back everyone, and welcome to episode 4 of the show, where we are chatting with a passionate bloke who loves living out west and is passionate about people. So much so, he is in the people business. What this guy doesn't know about leading people probably isn't worth knowing. So today we're diving into the community leader aspect of the show. So with a surprisingly diverse background, our guest is sharing his experiences of living out west and some amazing tips of dealing with people. And that is gold when it comes to running a business. I'm extremely excited about having my good friend, Senior Pastor of Life Christian Church Roma, Shane Wallis, on the show. Let's go. Pastor Shane Wallis, thanks for joining us on the show here today. Great to have you, mate. Welcome to Your Country Business. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, mate, it's a great privilege and honour to be here. I've listened to a few of the podcasts and look, they're really informative, mate. So it's great to catch up with some of the characters you might have known around the place and hear a bit of their story. So I'm intrigued to see where this one might go.
No, that's it, mate. I'm looking forward to it. We'll dig into a few things in your background and some of the life experiences you've definitely had living out in the bush. But I guess, Shane, to start off, what we do is we dig into the origin story. So take us back to the start, mate. Like where did you sort of originate from, and where did you pick up all your values and that have led you to being a senior pastor?
Yeah, mate. Well, I keep it a bit on the down low, but I was actually born in South Australia, so hopefully your listeners won't spread that too far. So I'm not a Queenslander by birth, but before I started school, we headed to the real state of Australia, Queensland, and I'll tell you what, the last 12 months has been the best state in the country to be as well. So I moved to Queensland to a property, and it's a property that was out near Hannaford there. Some of your listeners might know Hannaford, the Gums, that area. It was a property that Dad sort of carved out of the bush. There was sort of one fence and it was mostly scrub. So, as a little fella, watched as my dad sort of, I suppose, as I said, carved this property out of the bush. It was a wheat sheep property. So I did all my primary schooling there, and it was just typical country boy stuff. It's the best case place, I reckon, for a boy to grow up, motorbikes and, guns and all that sort of stuff. And just, there was a good sized school there. So, there was enough fellas to play a bit of sport with as well. Got into a bit of that in primary school. Then, so that we didn't have to spend a long time on the bus every day, we got sent away to Toowoomba to boarding school. So did another 5 years down there. Glorious weather that you get to have in Toowoomba.
Yep.
And I suppose, I really enjoyed that. I really got into played a lot of basketball when I was in Toowoomba and just found a bit of a niche there. And then came back to the farm. There was a few drought years, so I spent a bit of time, spent the year after high school, did a gap year at the farm, feeding cattle basically. And then I wanted a career in agriculture, and so went off to Gatton Ag College, got a degree in rural management there, which was kind of a half science, half management, I suppose, degree there. Also picked up a diploma in export management. So I thought that's where my life was headed, sort of ag consultancy is sort of how I'd pegged myself. But while I was at university, I got involved in the Christian groups on campus and just got a real passion for, I suppose, helping people in that sort of sphere of life, helping people's, I suppose, their spirit life come alive, and got a real passion for that. Anyway, long story short, ended up in Roma when I finished uni, and I was, I suppose the guy running the church that I now run, Pastor Colin Muller, gave us a call and said, "Hey Shane, come out here. They're looking for someone to just sort of I suppose be a bit of a presence in the school at lunchtimes, and that's where we first met, back when you were a student.
Yep.
So came out
years back now.
a few years back. Now we won't say how many, but yeah, it was a while ago. Let's just say that. And so we actually created the first Scripture Union chaplaincy position in Roma at that time, and look, it was a blast. It was. I just really enjoyed that period of my life. It was like getting paid to do stuff you just loved, and I think that's success in life, isn't it?
Yeah. Was there any hesitations? What was sort of going through your mind, I guess, when you get that phone call of, hey, let's move out to Roma? Obviously, you had some growing up out on the property, but was there anything of, doing the research or background or passionate about, like, I can do this, let's make it happen?
It's a great question, Shane, but I was too dumb and stupid to even think about that. It was just like the next opportunity in life. And look, the true story is of that. I actually had planned to have a gap year after my uni, and again, if your listeners will keep this a bit quiet, but my game plan was to basically move to the Sunshine Coast, work at BP, and play in my cousin's rock band. So that was
life goals.
That was my life goal, and so that was kind of, and I actually got accepted to work at the I put in some resumes around, and I could have been working at the Big Pineapple actually. Instead, I was working at Southern Queensland Institute of TAFE in Roma. So they were my two offers, but. No, it was something I really prayed into actually, and I just really felt that it was the right thing to do to come to Roma. And there was a mate of mine that I'd met at uni who sort of gave me a bit of part-time work to kick me off as well. So, it's funny. I think the younger you are, the less you, depending on your personality, of course, but sometimes you just take on challenges. And in fact, moving on from chaplaincy, that was kind of the thing. I'd done that, I'd been working in the school there for over 7 years, and I rang my line manager and I said, mate, I think I'm done. And he wanted to make it easier for me. He's like, no, Shane, we'll change this, we'll change that. And I was like, no, mate, I think I'm ready for the next, the next phase and the next challenge of my life. So I probably put a lot more thought into that career move than coming out to Roma on a whim. To volunteer, to just journey with kids at school. Yeah.
So you just jump straight into it when you're younger, compared to compared to decisions that you'd probably make now.
Yeah, 100%. You're 100%. Yeah, it was just like, let's go, let's see what happens. And as you get older, I think you've got more responsibilities, and you're probably just a bit more life aware as well. But but it all worked out for the best. Like, I'm glad it was the best decision I made was moving to Roma at that time, and. Maybe later in the podcast we'll talk about raising a family in the bush, but I wouldn't want to be anywhere else. So it was the right decision. But
So how many years do you reckon you're sort of chaplain out here then?
Well, in that chaplaincy role, about 7 years.
Yeah, right.
So I was 5 years as an SU chaplain or over. I might have been into my 6th year, but I was working out here in that type of role while we're kicking the position off and creating the position. So
what's some life takeaways from 7 years of chaplaincy?
Well,
that you can share on a podcast.
Yeah, that I can share on a podcast. Well, that's a really good question. I think, I'll say it this way: walking into school yesterday, just with one of my sons, and just seeing the little kids in there. This was at the primary school there, and just seeing them as they leave the school, and some of them are smiling, and some sort of head down, and I just had this thought yesterday how important those years, formative years are. Just literally that's yesterday for me. And I suppose, so some of the takeaways, I know that was your question, but just, I suppose, like helping our young people do that journey well, whether that's as parents, caregivers, just mates, uncles, aunts, whatever. It is a tough little period for our young people, and trying, whatever we can do as a community to help them. And I think chaplaincy was a massive part of that. It was a great resource in the school, still is today. I mean, back then we started with a 2-day-a-week position. Now there's, I think, 3 chaplains operating in Roma. And so, it's progressed a long way from there. But I just think as a community, it's something that we really got to throw a lot of energy at. And having good, strong young people in the bush is important as anywhere else. And, if we can give these guys a good start, it's empowers our whole community. So I don't know if that's answering your question.
No, it is. Because, we'll definitely, I guess, jump from that one, because going from chaplaincy to being the senior pastor of a church, and I guess probably should have started with this, but how it all sort of relates to business is that you're in the business of people, And that people management is absolutely critical to successfully managing a business. So we'll probably park that part for the gold a little bit later on. But so getting back to the chaplaincy then, so what was the transition then? You sort of talked about talking to your line manager.
No, that's right. And so I didn't really know what was next for me, but I knew that what I was doing in Churchwell was really important to me. At the time, I was a pretty busy young man actually, and then I'd sort of got married, and so you just can't run that hard, as I probably was as a young person forever. You'll fall apart. So I was sort of running the youth group at the time, and for the church, I was also doing a lot of other stuff, as you might remember, with the worship team and sort of some preaching, and I was on the board and pretty much had my finger in every little pot. So towards the end of my chaplaincy, I studied teaching so that I could do supply teaching and use that as an income to supplement what I was doing for the church. So that was kind of the long-term plan when I finished chaplaincy. I didn't really have any real massive desire or goal to run a church. It was not something at that time that was, front row center for me. I just wanted to empower again what was happening in the community and what we as a church were doing for our community. And I wanted to create as much space as I could in my world to be able to do that and do that well. So I was a supply teacher then for, I don't know, a couple of years, maybe 3 or 4 years. I can't really remember. I really enjoyed that. It was a great period of my life. And just the freedom of that, and a little shout out. I'll throw this out. A little shout out to Paul at Rex Furnishings. I worked for him when I first came to town, and when I was doing supply teaching, I wasn't working every day. Because you sort of get called in, and so Paul just let me come in and work for him during that time. So big shout out to you, Paul. You kept me going, kept my family in food and beverages for that little period of my life. So that was gold. So I had work every day.
Had that flexibility to keep doing what you wanted to do as well.
Unbelievable. So I had work. I was able to do the supply teaching, was able to work for Paul on my days I wasn't at school. And so I was full-time employed, and was able to do the other stuff that I felt was a real calling on my life and something I was really passionate about. And then to get to answer your question then, our senior pastor knew that his time, probably a bit like me in chaplaincy, he knew his time was coming to a close, and actually approached me and said, Shane, what would you think about, taking on the church? In the meantime, I'd got in our movement, it's called a provisional minister certificate. It's like your trainer wheels to be a pastor, I suppose. A bit like your P's as a car, really. So I had that already from a lot of the work I was already doing and some studies that I'd done. And so it wasn't a big transition, I suppose, for my ordination, that's called, in my sector of the community, to move that to an ordained minister certificate. So anyway, long story short, the board sort of selected me with their selection process to be the next senior pastor of the church. And then as far as life goals and stuff, my first message that I spoke at church was called The Accidental Pastor. And it was, I tell people that it was about just a journey of doing the next thing that you feel called to do, or the next thing that's important to you. And if you keep doing that, it'll land in the right place. And it did for me anyway. So
out here and not working at the Big Pineapple as a in a rock band.
Yeah, look, that band crash and burn. So, Lee, if you're listening, I apologise.
One path you could have went down. So I guess, mate, from that, going into being the senior pastor and obviously dealing with everything that comes with that, and this is one of the reasons to get you on the podcast and talk about it, is because my time dealing with small businesses out in rural, remote Queensland, is the people component is huge, because we just don't have a big pool of people to choose from. So you sort of end up having to do a lot more people management and coaching and that, and dealing with those things, because you just don't have the luxury of having a huge candidate pool to pick from. And I guess talking about those struggles with people and how you manage people and that sort of thing as well. So going into that, what's some of the takeaways, or I guess the challenges that you've sort of hit running the church with people?
That's a really good question. So just people may or may not realise, running a church organisation is very similar to running any other organisation of similar size. We are just as dependent on our human resource and our finances as the next person, and also there's also government regulations and all that sort of stuff. So it's very similar. Like the challenges that I've faced would be very similar to any small business in town. and we're a volunteer organisation. So I suppose, but I think this works just as well in the private sector. Is motivating your volunteers is a massive deal, and so helping, I suppose. So not staff for us, but volunteers, helping our volunteers, our people, the people in my world, the people that help the vision of our church become a reality. And I suppose that's the key word, is vision. I think certainly helping people understand that they're part of the win is a massive deal in motivating people to I suppose realise what they're doing. There's an old saying, Shane. There was this guy who walked past these guys who were doing something, and he asked the first guy, "What are you doing?" And he's laying bricks. And the next guy, he says, "What are you doing?" He's building a wall. And then the next guy, he says, "What are you up to?" He says, "Well, I'm building a cathedral." And I think whether it's a church scenario or a small business, I think that's really key in keeping your people motivated and on team, because we call it team at church. It's really a team, So everybody doing their bit is what brings corporate success. And again, that's the same, I think, in any organisation. But with specific challenges to Roma, is the transient nature of our population is massive. And so we see that in church world as anyone else. And you mentioned, finding people with specific skill sets. As we've grown as a church, that's become less of a deal, I suppose. We've been able to specialise a little bit more. We've got people with specialist skills, and we might talk about it at the back end, I'm not sure, but your skill set that you were able to help us with, getting with the tech, getting online and stuff was massive. Yeah. Whereas, a few years before we wouldn't have had that. But so for the transient nature, do you want me to speak to that now?
Yeah, well, I think so. And probably the question around that then would be how, and fully aware that there might not be ever an answer to this, but how do you prepare, or at least, I guess, minimise the blow that sort of does bring? Because it is difficult when you train people up, or they're doing a certain role, they bring value to the organisation or to the business, and then next minute you get the phone call, "Oh, I've got to go in a month," and then it's the scramble.
Happens all the time. I see it happen to my mates, in their businesses. Certainly in our world, it's been massive over the journey. And look, I think there's two things I'd like to say about that. One is own the space you're in. It's no good just whinging about it, because we also have opportunities out here in Roma that we don't have. And so I talk to my pastor mates, I suppose, in the big city, and they think they're transient, but they got no idea what it's like out here. And I just smile and nod. But they have challenges I don't have. So I think that's the first thing. Own your space, know what it's like. So we know. So you can either whinge about it or accept it and use it as a platform. So what we've done specifically as a church to try and minimise the impact of that is we've done two things. And one is we get the people that are moving on and who've been part of our journey to speak to the people that remain, I suppose, as how their journey with us has empowered them and impacted them. So we celebrate them leaving rather than cry about it. And the other thing we do, which is a big picture for the success of the organisation, is we have a constant culture of training. So I would say to someone, if you have a role, part of that role is to train someone else in everything you know. Look, mate, that's an ongoing thing, encouraging people to put that into practice. But I think at a bottom line, if your culture is that we have a saying, everybody's following someone and everyone's taking someone with them. And so I think, and again, any organisation could benefit that, because you don't want one person to leave who is the only person who knows that,
I think that's probably important, touching on what you're saying before too. Like you mentioned the word culture, but looking at explaining that vision to people as well. If you might just be laying the brick, but if you understand that's part of, building the cathedral, and you put that into a training culture and organisation, training culture, I guess, so that everyone is training that next person up, because it's not just about laying the brick, it's bigger than that.
Yeah, and it'll be there after you're gone. And so having that sort of culture in people as well, this will go on, whether you're running, a plumbing business or a mechanic business or whatever it may be, a corner store.
Yep.
This organisation will be here after you've left. What legacy are you leaving? But in answer to the transient nature thing, definitely an ongoing culture of training is something that we continue. And you've got to, as a leader, so we'll talk as a leader now, it's our job as leaders, whether we're leading a business or leading a church or leading an organisation, we set the culture. So a guy said to me once, we're talking about culture, and a guy said, "Shane, culture leaks." And what he meant by that was it's the leader's job to continually sow that in. Like, we can't just be complacent once we've said it once, we have a training culture here. Like, that doesn't fly anywhere.
Yeah.
So as leaders, it's our job to continually sow the culture that we want to reap, I suppose. And again, I think that's the same everywhere.
Yeah. And I know talking off air or off from that podcast, I guess, one of the things that I know we were talking about from the point of view of challenges and that, and it resonates with small business owners when you become, I guess, the master of your own destiny, the master of your own time. And we were sort of mentioning about time management.
Yeah.
So what challenges have you hit there, and sort of how to overcome that?
Yeah, massive, mate, massive. I say pastoring's like farming. I've got a farming background, so I see similarities. And on a farm, you'll never get all your work done. Not in an hour, not in a day, not in a year, not in a lifetime.
Mm-hmm.
So owning that and then prioritizing. So for us as a church, also that meant, Shane, well, what is it that we do? What is it that we bring to Roma that maybe nobody else is? Because there's a number of churches in Roma, as you might be aware, but we all have the same message, but we can approach it in different ways. And so first of all, I think in answer to your question, you've got to know what you do and what you're called to do and what your business organisation does, and then use that as a starting point to prioritise your time, because you'll never get everything done. So, but we do have a saying. We have lots of little sayings at our church, and one is what you prioritise gets done.
Yeah.
And we say that all the time. So it's kind of a no excuse culture as well. Like, don't tell me you didn't have time. Tell me you didn't prioritise it. And so that's the same as me as a leader. So I've got to model that. I've got to model that to my congregation. I've got to model good time management, good work-life balance to my congregation as well. But it comes back to priorities, definitely. If you don't know what you're there to do, you're going to be doing anything. And so I actually remember walking out of someone's office one day, and there was a little sign on the wall that said, "Do your real work first."
Yep.
And that really resonated with me, because there's so much that I can do in a week that is work, but it's not necessarily what's going to take our organisation forward, and it's maybe not what I have to do now. I'm one of these guys who's always under the pump and sort of last minute finishing stuff, because I probably didn't do my real work first, Shane. So,
and there's probably trade-offs between. I think I'm thinking about three things, like you mentioned before, like the farming example, that there's never enough hours in the day.
You've got to own that, yeah.
And then prioritizing things, but then also that work-life balance, because if you're to sort of draw that as a triangle almost, that you're sort of always balancing that up in the air. But yeah,
Do you want me to speak into work-life balance now?
I think so, yeah, because it is, yeah, it does affect a lot.
Yeah, look, it took me a long time. Like, I was one of these morons that runs really hard until they hit a brick wall, and probably didn't set a good example for people in my younger days about what's a sane work ethic. And it's come back to bite me a little bit, Shane. But what I've learned in the meantime is that our health as people, like getting enough sleep, I mean, there's more research and stuff going into all this all the time. Just getting enough sleep, look, I'll say it this way, if I'm not at my best, I'm not at my most productive. So in my head, and I'm a bit of a, we're all different, but I actually had to almost get the headspace where recreation and relaxation was diarised in, and that it helped me achieve my goals. I had to make that mental shift where it wasn't time off for my goals, but actually taking time out was achieving my goals. And once I was able to get that cog to turn in my brain, a lot of stuff turned around for me. And I don't think I'm Robinson Crusoe there, as far as particularly probably small people who will be listening to this podcast.
Just think of that when you talk about turning the cog, like, was it probably overcoming that feeling, and this is probably speaking for myself, of you feel guilty, basically.
Yeah, 100%.
You're cheating yourself. You've got, like, the work is never done. You need to go and get something else done. What are you doing taking this time out to go and, to take that time out for yourself, basically, to recharge?
You've nailed me.
Yep.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, guilt. Yeah, had to get past the guilt of I'm not working now, and I'm awake.
Yeah.
So I think, you've nailed it. But what I've come to realise and understand as I got a bit older, like you asked that question about when I was younger, and and I said, "Man, I didn't think about it. That's just how we used to roll." But I think as you get older, you become more aware of that. And my productivity is definitely higher when I'm in a good space emotionally and physically. There's no doubt about that. So I'm actually achieving more by taking the
You're recharging
by
the batteries.
recharging for sure. And and it's I think something we've all got to learn at some point.
I think it's a hard lesson to, like you said, you've got to turn that cog, I think, yourself and come to that realization. You do. So just moving on to the next part of the show here, which is looking at the innovation and overcoming some sort of things. So I know, talking before the show, I think at the time you mentioned when you took over the church and talking about that direction and that vision, you're able to share some stuff on how you sort of overcome to pull that together.
Yeah, so being a bit more innovative, I suppose part of that is finding where you differentiate from I suppose the other people who are offering a similar product, because you want everyone's needs to be met, and so I suppose that's something. And so I've already mentioned that, just making sure we know what we do and do it well. I think as far as innovating, it's probably not a lot of stories to share. Just like what I mentioned before about the transitional nature of people, and so that was an innovation, I suppose you could say, introducing that training culture, introducing a culture of celebrating when people were moving on, celebrating their part in our story, was, I suppose, an innovation to try and get a negative and turn it into a positive.
Yep.
Sort of obviously other stuff. I mean, last year, I can speak about last year, that was a year of innovation for everybody.
Yep.
And part of that for us was getting a culture is gathering. Like that's church, it's community. Like, what is church? What is the most powerful thing about a church environment? What's a community? It's journeying with people. It's catching up with people, with mates, and enjoying a journey together. It's the same reason people play footy. It's exactly the same thing. And so when that is removed, how then do you kick the same goal?
Probably adding context to that from COVID restrictions.
Yeah, so sorry, depending, this could be, so timestamp this, we're talking about it in March 2021, and COVID hit in 2020, and so we were restricted from gathering, everything shut down. So very quickly we had to pivot online, as a lot of people did, and your organisation, Shane, came to our rescue actually with advice.
We had a few late nights.
We had a lot of late nights. Some of them didn't have to be as late. We're doing what we're doing now and just having a bit of a chinwag about life and the journey and moving forward with stuff. And I think I enjoyed that. I actually enjoyed, we'd come in and you would help us with getting our content online, which I think was really powerful. And look, to be honest, it blew us away how well that content was received and how widely it was viewed. Like, we had people, to be honest, all over the world dropping in on that content. And then, of course, when countries started opening back up, people went back to their own churches. But we certainly had people journeying with us in a little period of time there. We're from not just all over the country, but from all over the world, which was kind of different. We didn't expect that. We didn't anticipate that. And again, and now they've transitioned, the transient nature of Roma, mate.
Yeah.
They've transitioned back to where their local church, but we were able to be part of their story for a little while. And the help that you gave us. But with that too, that transitioning, I think being able to pivot quickly. So, like, as you would well know, there was a lot of time, and we weren't on our own here. A lot of organisations did the same thing as us, but a lot of time spent on YouTube just working out, how do we do this new thing well? I rang a lot of my mates.
Yeah.
That was a challenging period, as you might know. So I actually, funnily enough, I had 7 meetings planned for 5 days. The most I'd planned in my history as a pastor over 10 years that week, and they all got cancelled. So that was pretty tough. But then within 2 weeks, we had our online up and running. And so we just gave ourselves, I think this was important too, we gave ourselves a 1 week window.
Yeah.
Just
you need that grace period to sort of just breathe.
Didn't feel we just had to throw anything up online. We wanted to throw something up that was valuable content that we would want to consume ourselves.
And it probably, even like, closing a shop front sort of thing, it's almost similar to that. But like you mentioned, it is in the business of getting people together, which is the exact opposite you want to do in a pandemic. And it probably changes, I guess, how you deliver your value a bit as well, and having that huge impact and being able to pivot a little bit. But I guess what I'm sort of saying is definitely changing how you did that is different too. You can't just sort of take your normal model of how you do a Sunday or do what you do and then go, but we'll just shift it online, because that whole model had to be turned upside down.
A lot of people did that and tried that and had some success doing that, but we tried to produce content that we would want to consume, and so we didn't try and pretend that everything was the same, and I think that helped with what we were doing be successful. And like you were talking, all of a sudden, instead of talking to a group of people, I was talking to a camera, and it's different. You wouldn't realize how different it is. And so just, again, learning new skills. So that part of it was refreshing, actually, was the learning new skills. And
YouTube's definitely your friend.
Yeah, YouTube was a friend, and just other mates who'd done it and before, stuff like that before. And just there's a lot of communication just around. This is the other thing. I didn't learn much at uni, Shane, but one thing I learned was somebody out there knows everything.
Yep.
And so just getting into connection with, not pretending that we knew what we were doing, but connecting with people who did, I think was really positive. And again, going, all right, our model has to change. And so and the other thing I think with that too is being prepared to have a go, and also being prepared to say something didn't work. So we tried a few things as well in that period that were working for others, and then we gave them a crack. And they didn't work so well for us. And then I was supposed to have the guts to say, no, we got that wrong, knocking that on the head quite quickly. I think that's also really important moving forward, and dealing with challenges as well. So there was a few things that we tried that we cancelled. And
I think that's important to realise too. Just because someone else is doing it doesn't mean that it's the right thing for your culture and what you're trying to do.
Yeah, 100%. And to be honest, one of the things that we tried, I'll mention it, was after the service, it was like Facebook rooms or something, where you'd go into these rooms. It was sort of like a Zoom meeting, and there were lots of them, and because people were locked in their homes, I thought that was really going to fly. Like, I'm still surprised it didn't work as well as I thought. But I tell you what probably was the case is, leading up to pre-COVID, we put a lot of energy into having people connect and creating a sense of community with small groups and all that sort of thing. And so the bottom line is, our church was well serviced, and they didn't need it as much as we thought it would be really positive. The feedback was, we don't need that. We're actually our needs are being met already by you guys in other ways. So I suppose that was the positive to come out of it.
Yeah, yeah. So, mate, moving on to the final parts here of the show, and one thing that we definitely want to do is get some pieces of gold advice. So we did do some planning before the show about that, and you've got two pieces there, mate. So what's some of your advice that you'd take away, like that other small business owners or people looking at even going down that journey could walk away with?
Yeah, well, I thought about this a little bit. I know we sort of talked about leading people a bit, and that is certainly a massive part of your job as a pastor, and all the intricacies with that. But I did approach this question more as if because I'm someone who runs an organisation, and thinking of your small business owners out there, and if you're thinking of starting a small business, or you're thinking of getting into some form of small business, because I've seen a lot of times people approaching these things, but their life goals and the business that they want to create aren't in alignment.
Yep.
And so I thought the first piece of advice is that I'd be giving people out there who are starting something big is, make sure that this is going to kick the goals that you want it to kick. Because as an example, depending on the small business, like if you've got a young family or whatever, and you think, this is going to give me heaps of time with my family, it may or may not be the case. So yeah, that was my first bit of advice. Just do your homework. Like I talked about when we got online, it was effectively, we were running a completely different organization for 3 months. And I think make sure, I think I've answered that, Shane. Just make sure, do your research, do your homework, talk to other people in the industry, because too many times I think they don't align.
Yeah, and I think
it's just a good idea.
Probably having that honest conversation in your own mind as well, of going, and sort of not try. It's difficult to do it, but not looking at it with rose-coloured glasses and going, if you're going to start a business to have more time with your family, well, probably not the best thing to be doing, because it's not going to give you more time especially in the startup phase. In the startup phase, definitely. And again, that's industry specific, I assume, and what your resources are at your disposal. But yeah, being really honest with yourself. Because there might be something you've always dreamt of or always wanted to do, but the timing might be off. Yeah. So it might be right thing, wrong time. Yep.
As I talked about, when I first came to Roma, there's no way I can do what I used to do back then for lots of reasons. But then it was right. Now it wouldn't be.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that would be my first piece of advice.
I know your second one, mate, was around the work-life balance. It was.
Yeah, and I held off this earlier in the podcast because I was hoping you were going to ask me that. And we did touch on it with our own emotional energy and recharging the batteries. But I would, and again, this is stuff in my role that I spend a lot of time, may not realise, but researching a lot of different things that affect community. And I spend a lot of time in that sphere. And so work-life or home life, I'm going to call it home-life balance, is really, really important. And so my second piece of advice would be that the family should never come second to the organisation. And look, a lot of pastors, to be honest with you, get that wrong at times, self-included. It needs to be an ongoing conversation. But if, for my, my life goals, for my own personal self-worth, and for me to enjoy life as I want to, I need to make sure that I'm empowering the home journey. Because the reality is, and you can look at all the studies you want, but the reality is if you want to look at the statistics, those people that are happier at the back end are those people who've invested in their home life, and because eventually it'll catch up with you.
Oh, the impact's huge.
It catches up with everyone eventually. Everyone thinks they're going to avoid it, and they think their home life is indestructible or whatever. But I tell you what, mate, it's not the case. And so that would be my second piece of advice: is to make sure that your home world becomes first before the organisation. If it does, your organisation will be successful. If it doesn't, we're not sure.
Well, I guess the other thing too behind that is that's where your support's going to come from. Like when everything else goes pear-shaped or belly up, you're probably not going to be looking to the people in your organisation for that personal support. You're going to be looking for it for your family. And if that's not there, it's just going to make it more difficult.
Yeah, look, and I've talked with so many guys probably in other people's organisations but not running it, and the organisation is just drawing so much out of them. And I've sort of had to tell people, I said, that when you move on, they're just going to replace you.
Yep.
We want to be sowing and investing. And, I also talk to people about the other side. I say, well, if you want to, get a promotion at work, or you want to be, the person that doesn't get sacked or whatever, you got to make yourself indispensable to your organisation. That's just obvious. But at the same time, if the organisation is taking more than it's giving, and impacting that area, you're going to be the loser.
Yeah, you got to be aware of that cost.
Just got to be aware of it. And yeah, look, if you can, and as you said, Shane, so correctly, if you get sacked, or if your work life blows up, your family is going to be your security. But it doesn't work the other way.
No.
Yeah.
No, it doesn't. You'd probably be the what would you say, the exception to the rule there if it did. And
people will be supportive for so long and everything, and we get that, and we have mates at work and all that. But the reality is you're going to be the one picking up the pieces.
Yeah.
So just to remind your listeners that your success in life will also be connected to what's happening at home.
No, that's awesome, mate. Like, that's great advice. So maintaining that home life balance. And also looking at making sure if you are going to go down the journey that it does match your life goals, which those two really do go hand in hand as well.
Absolutely.
So, mate, that's absolutely gold, Shane. So, mate, moving on to a little fun bit of the show, and then we'll move into our pitch where people can find out more about you. But if you want to chuck on your headphones, mate, we're going to have a little bit of a challenge here, a little 1-minute challenge of random questions to dive into the psyche that is Shane Wallis. So watch out. If you say anything that you don't want to say, I can edit it. So first thing that pops into your head, we're going to have a crack at a minute. I think Rick Grinsell managed to get 10 questions through. So practice the thinking on your feet, mate. So let's fire away. What type of milk do you put in your cereal?
Full cream.
Yep. Favourite hotbox food, mate? Healthy stuff.
Pie.
Yeah, okay. What is your spirit animal?
No idea.
Oh, okay. Which one would you rather, wash the dishes, mow the lawn, clean the bathroom, or vacuum the house?
Lawn.
Do you love or hate roller coasters?
I have a love-hate relationship with roller coasters.
Texting or talking?
Texting.
Okay. Always early or always late?
Unfortunately, it's late, mate.
Okay. Say something in a different language. Put you on the
Konnichiwa.
spot. Put you on the spot. How many pillows do you sleep with?
2.
Scale of 1 to 10. How good of a driver are you?
Average.
So
sorry, 5.
We'll say 5 then.
Well, let's go 6.
6. Best place you have ever travelled or holidayed you ever had?
Oh, best place to travel, Philippines.
Yeah, yep. If one animal was made the size of an elephant, which would be the scariest?
I think I just ran out of time.
What would it be though?
Oh, that was the hardest one. To be honest, I didn't have an answer for you. Let's call it an ant.
I'd agree with that one.
No idea.
I think
That's a toughie.
you had to bail on the spirit animal one, but I think you beat Rick, so I think you're up to we'll say 11, mate. You beat him by 1.
Well, I should have checked the rules because I wasn't sure if you could say pass or not. So, but I had no idea.
No, it's good. It's just a bit of fun to
cool.
to dive into it. So we'll see
That's
if
cool.
see how good people are thinking on their feet.
Mate, good to get out the road. I was nervous about that for the entire interview. So,
Oh, good, Noah. Thanks, mate. And the pitch. So, where can people find out more about you and your organisation?
yeah, so pretty easy, mate. Life Christian Church Roma. We're on Facebook. That's probably the best spot to find. We're actually just rebuilding our website at the moment. So
Yep.
in the next probably month, 6 weeks, we're hoping to have a brand new website up. But yeah, that's probably the easiest place to find us. Just Google us. We're there. I tell people if I'm out of town, just ring anyone in Roma and ask for Pastor Shane. They'll
Someone
know
will hunt you
someone
down.
who'll know. So if worst comes to worst, just ring anybody you know in Roma and ask for Pastor Shane.
Yep.
2 degrees of separation, they'll find me.
So, Facebook or any random person living in Roma.
Pretty much.
Okay, well, that's a good way to hunt you down and find out more info.
right, yeah.
No, that's cool, mate. Well, look, thanks very much for coming on the show. Absolute awesome advice and dealing with the issues that we do face out here running businesses and organisations as well. I see them as going hand in hand because we are dealing with those same issues. So, mate,
Yeah.
absolutely awesome having you on. Thanks very much. Appreciate it, eh?
Yeah, well, thanks, Shane. It was a privilege. And again, thanks to Your Country Business Podcast for all the help that you gave us in the pandemic and when we went online. And we're still using some of those templates and things now. So it was great to be able to come on here, mate, and say thanks. I appreciate it.
Oh, all good, buddy. Cheers, eh? Thanks. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed the show, pop over to Facebook, Instagram, or YouTube. You can find us at Your Country Business and follow us so you don't miss an episode. Until next time, enjoy living and loving life in the country.